Okay, now to talk about an album that my typical audience of prog, progressive metal, hardcore metal, they definitely want to hear my take on, which is the latest Carly Rae Jepsen album. But, I feel like as much as I love Taylor Swift, I feel like she done my Canadian girl dirty by releasing her big album on the same day that Carly Rae had her album slated for, and I also believe Meghan Trainor had an album slated for the same day as well. Like, we had three big mega pop queens releasing an album on the same day. But yeah, anyway, let's talk about Carly Rae Jepsen for a little bit.
What happened was we reached the moon, but lost in space. I think we got there all too soon.
The Loneliest Time by Carly Rae Jepsen. So, for those of you that don't know about my girl Carly Rae, she is the Canadian queen of pop, in my opinion. Canadian girl. Got her big start with, I think it's Call Me Maybe. I think that was her big album that kind of started it all off. And had, a pretty sizable hit with the follow-up album of Emotion. That, in my opinion, is still my favorite of hers. And then came out with Dedicated and Dedicated Side B, and now we come into The Loneliest Time, where I feel as though the past couple of albums was very singular in Carly's approach. It's very synth pop, very airy pop, very dream pop in that sense, very almost innocent, fun kind of pop. I feel like The Loneliest Times is the first album of hers that she's starting to flirt with the idea of diversifying her sound. And in some ways, some people say that this is, the major drawback to this, even though we've kind of been asking her to do this for a while now. But other people are thinking that this is more of a change of form. Because it's interesting, like I've listened to a lot of what I would consider a mixed grab bag of tracks this year, and I don't feel as though The Loneliest Time has that. I feel like there is this kind of through line within a lot of these tracks, even though they hold a lot of different themes, a lot of different ideas, most of it, being boy problems or being lonely in the search of love and all that, very, very staple Carly Rae topics. But I also feel as though this is Carly starting to mature a little bit in terms of songwriting, in terms of composing music, taking some of these with a little bit more of a grain of salt, and also being able to kind of poke fun at it a little bit. I mean, look at the 6th track of Beach House, which reads a little bit almost like a satire of, oh, isn't this really hard when I'm trying to find a guy and, they bring me back to their house and all these big red flags to the point of, yeah, this guy's going to, grind my organs up. But in this very fun, poppy singing styles. With these diversifying of themes and diversifying of essences, it's allowing Carly to really kind of try and stretch her legs, and I feel like she succeeded pretty well. The first 3 tracks, Surrender My Heart, Joshua Tree, and Talking to Yourself, big bangers in Carly Rae Jepsen's discography. We've got that immediate pop hooks. I find myself singing and humming along to a lot of these tracks. They're very immediate as well. They're very juicy. And unlike a lot of pop hits where I feel as though it's like a stick of juicy fruit gum, which very flavorful upon the first 5 listens, but after that, I'm just like, okay, I've milked all the fun out of this. Now I'm just left with this rubbery glob of bleh in my mouth. I at least find that these 3 tracks really do have a lot more punch to it. There's a little bit more of this underlying flavor that's going on that allows me to enjoy it upon, the half dozen to the full dozen of listens afterwards. Once we get past, the usual signature of Carly Rae's music, we come into the 4th track of Far Away, which it's a little bit more airy. There's a little bit more space between a lot of these big immediate tracks. It allows it to just kind of take a bit of a breather to allow us to kind of just think about what's kind of transpired besides. And Sideways feels like a return to form, which is kind of funny because there's only a handful of albums of it this time. But it's reminding me of some of the tracks that we heard from Emotion. Very fun, very bouncy, very interesting in that sense. And then we come into the Beach House, which is just a fun track. It's, as I mentioned, it's kind of laying out the trials and tribulations of trying to date, trying to know and get to know people when, oh boy, some people are not what they seem to be upon first meeting. Now, this is to say that not all the tracks really hit very hard. Like I will say, The Bends and Western Winds are two tracks that I'm not a big fan of, which is really interesting because Western Winds was like one of the first big singles to drop from this album. Like I understand how it's supposed to be just this fun, lighthearted and thing, but I just feel like the beat on this one's a little too rigid. I feel like there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in it, and I just felt like it was kind of a leftover track from the Emotion cutting floor. It's almost as though she picked up something that didn't quite make it onto that album and started to rework it, started to Frankenstein it together, and it just didn't quite fit together all that much. Now, one of the tracks I feel isn't quite getting the love that it really deserves is the following track of So Nice. This one might be my second favorite track off of this album as a whole. I love how airy it is. I love how it almost feels like just this caress of a feather on it. It's just so light and so feathery in that sense. I love Carly's vocals on here. It shows how much of a master she is within her range and within her own commanding. She's able to not only be very present and very astute on this track, but she's also able to just elevate it to this very... I don't know, it tickles my ASMR loving heart, and it's just like this nice warm hug. It's so nice. What can I say about it, but so nice. And from there, we also come into a kind of a banger track of Bad Thing Twice, and I do enjoy this one. It's got a very prominent beat on this. It's very danceable. It's very fun and grooving in that sense, and it's kind of what I wish Wayward Wind was, but unlike the constraints that I felt with Western Wind, I felt like Bad Thing Twice at least allowed it to open up the dance floor and allowed us to move around a little bit. And it's so interesting. I have a split mind with the following track of Shooting Star because Carly is commanding this almost hyper pop vocalization effect on her voice. And on the one hand, I really love the fact that she's trying something new. Again, we're seeing that diversification. I can get this. Diversification. There we go. That's what I was going for. Trying new things, experimenting a little bit. And on the one hand, I really do applaud it, and it's really interesting, and I'm really enjoying this slide that she's having into this more experimental hyperpop era, but I'm not quite sure if it fits on the context of this track itself. Like, unlike a lot of the tracks that came before it within this danceable beat, it's very big, it's very massive, it's very isolating, and it pushes the audience away. That I'm not a big fan, because at least with hyperpop, it has that kind of an essence to it a little bit, but there's always this underlying, like, we're gradiating on purpose, and I don't know if that really fits within Superstar itself. And then Go Find Yourself or Whatever is a fun kind of come down before the big track. And this one I can honestly take or leave. I'm not a big fan of this one. But it's the final track, the title track of Loneliest Time. This track might be my favorite track in the entire year. And that is really saying something, because this year has had a lot, especially for my proggy metal heart. Having The Loneliest Time be my favorite track of the year, man, it really goes to show something, like it's got this disco revival dance beat that Daft Punk was playing with Random Access Memories, but it's rooted in this very wholesome, almost like nostalgic innocence about it, without it ever being like melodramatic or eye-rolling cheese. It's always so... I don't want to go back and say so nice, but it's just such a warm hug. And I love just how earnest this track is, like I can see a lot of people, especially in this time, saying that this track would be cringe or cheesy or over the top. But in my mind, I think that this track is much more innocent. It's a lot more earnest and very genuine in that sense. And I really wish more artists would do this, because this tickles my heart just perfectly, just right. I find myself coming back to this track over and over and over again. I love the buildup. I love that final payoff when we get to that final point of this track. Really, this is a perfect pop track, and I really hope that more pop artists would take note of trying to emulate this style, because they're taking everything that really worked with the kind of disco-y dance movement from the late 70s and applied that fun aspect into this very genuine kind of just trying to find another soul within a loneliest time, because man, the last couple of years, it really was the loneliest time, and finally being able to start to get out of that is such a breath of fresh air and just this really nice warm hug. So yeah, that's the album proper. Then we have a couple bonus tracks that are pretty fun, Anxious, No Thinking Over the Weekend, and Keep Away. And they're varying degrees of good. You know, I think that she could have left these 3 tracks and put out The Loneliest Time Side B or Deluxe or something that she did with Dedicated and Emotion. And yeah, I think we would have had a really fun companion album in that sense. But as we are here, yeah, I will say that The Loneliest Time is it's an album that I've really been enjoying. And, you know, the first couple of listens, I was like, I'm not sure if I really enjoy this diversifying of sound that we had been begging her to do, but I'm really starting to get into it, and I'm really enjoying how unified these tracks are, even though they cover a much wider range of styles that we have gotten from Carly. Another very solid album from an artist that, in my opinion, has yet to put out a dud, has yet to really put out an album that I have been less than excited over. You know, I'm excited to return to this album. I'm excited to revisit it time and time again. And yeah, it's one that I will say, The Loneliest Time by Carly Rae Jepsen, is one that I would absolutely pick up in physical format. I think it's a great album if you're a fan of pop music, if you're a fan of more contemporary pop. I think you're going to have a great time with this. I don't think that my general audience of progressive rock, heavy metal fans are probably going to enjoy this one as much as I do, but you know, you got to diversify your own musical style, otherwise you'll just stagnate. And that's what I love to do. I love to really dive into some of these more pop hits to give myself a little bit more variety at the end of the day. And yeah, this was a great one. This is a great one. I suggest checking it out, if nothing else, just to see if it connects with you. That's what I've got. So thank you all. Oh, I guess I should say, how have you guys liked it? Did you love this album? Did you hate this album? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's what I've got for you guys today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.